There is massive paranoia now inside Iran because very clearly there is deep security cracks within the regime, and they're infiltrated. Their intelligence agencies are infiltrated, and this has been planned for a very long time. Months, if not years.
Israel's defence minister is warning that Tehran will burn if Iran keeps firing missiles after both sides exchange strikes overnight, as the calls from Keir Starmer and other world leaders for calm appear to fall on deaf ears. Iran bombarded Tel Aviv with hundreds of missiles in retaliation for yesterday's Israeli strikes, which targeted its nuclear bases with some of its senior military leaders and nuclear experts. The rocket attacks on the Tel Aviv area wounded 34 people, while 2 people were killed and another 19 people were injured after Iranian missiles struck the central Israeli city of Rishon LeZion on Saturday. Now, the Israeli Foreign Affairs spokesperson Oren Marmorstein said that there's a clear difference between the two styles of military attack.
The Iranian regime is targeting population centers. We are doing everything possible to avoid harming civilians. The Iranians are going after civilians.
And this resident of Tel Aviv, Howard Alistine, said it's very worrying.
My wife, she's Israeli. She's very, very anxious and she wants to leave as soon as possible. She's talking about going over the bridge to Jordan, getting on a ferry to Cyprus. She's talking about going to Eilat.
Meanwhile, Iran has warned that the UK, the US and France, that it will target their bases and ships in the region if they help stop the strikes on Israel. It's definitely a very, very tense situation. And as I said right at the start, it doesn't feel like it's de-escalating at this stage. Well, let's now speak with Suzanne Kianpour, who is an Emmy-nominated US Iranian journalist, and Suzanne is a real expert on the long-standing tensions between Israel and Iran. Suzanne, welcome to the show. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So how would you characterise the situation today as you see it?
So it's interesting, when we've been watching interviews with Israeli officials, they're repeatedly asked, would you say that Israel is at war with Iran? And they are making a point to not call this a war. They're saying it's an operation. And as we saw, Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's prime minister, has come out and spoken directly to the Iranian people, saying that they're effectively clearing the way for the Iranian people to take out their regime. He's ending his speeches with Zan Zindagi Azadi, Women, Life, Freedom, going back to the rallying cry in 2022 when a young woman, Mahsa Amini, was killed by morality police for showing her hair. And we saw what happened after that. People went into the streets and protested, and there was a brutal crackdown by the regime forces. So we're all kind of waiting to see one, if that happens. My sources inside Iran are saying that it's eerily quiet. And two, if whether or not the Israeli operation called Rising Lion, which is an ode to pre-revolutionary era Iran of the Shir Khorshid, the lion and the sun. So we're in a holding pattern right now, but as you say, there is no sign of de-escalation. I've been speaking to my Gulf diplomat sources who are saying that Netanyahu is listening to no one. I asked them if there's any sign of a de-escalation brokered by the neighboring countries, because obviously this is not ideal for the Saudis and the Emirates of the world.
And of course, the Saudis and others are trying to really do a big push on prosperity in the region. They're trying to open themselves up to things like tourism and all that sort of thing. So they will not want this to escalate. I'm just interested in what you were saying there about Netanyahu issuing that message to the Iranian people, calling on them to topple their regime. Now, some people may raise an eyebrow at that because, of course, many people in Israel are not happy with Netanyahu. But let's put that to one side. How do you think that message will go down in Iran? And will these attacks on Iran, will they make people feel sort of slightly more wedded to the regime? Or is Netanyahu right? Will that activate or stimulate an uprising? Bearing in mind, Iran has cracked down incredibly brutally and bloodily on any sign of dissent.
So we're already seeing attempts at making it difficult for the Iranian public to mobilize. Internet is slow. We're seeing messages of the Iranian prosecutor general allegedly has come out and threatened members of the public with arrest if they are to, they're calling it kind of psychological, playing into the psychological warfare of the Israelis. So if they're spreading information about what's happening, aka spreading information about regime officials leaving and information about gathering and trying to actually create a situation where people would feel comfortable enough to go out in the streets and protest and take down the regime. Now, the thing that's interesting is that, you know, normally a foreign power attacking your country wouldn't be something for cause for celebration, but we're seeing very conflicting emotions. We're seeing people inside Iran scared because explosions are going around them. I mean, keep in mind that in Israel, there's a very strong civil defense system. Israelis are in bunkers. We've seen injuries, thankfully,
And
so
deaths,
far.
and two deaths.
Yes, we've seen 2 deaths. We've seen injuries. But we know that they're in bunkers. So, but the Iranians are not in bunkers. They're not prepared for this. But at the same time, there are these conflicting emotions of hope, but also fear. And that being said, we also have seen historically regime change from outside forces not working, particularly when the US is involved, which is one of the reasons why the US is reticent to get involved in this. Obviously, they back Israel, but they're not directly involved. And the Israeli prime minister yesterday, former prime minister Ehud Barak, was saying that Israel does not have the capacity to take out Fordo alone. And Fordo is where the enrichment necessary to make a nuclear bomb happens. That's the facility that's inside the mountain.
Gosh, so there's a lot to unpack there. So it's really interesting what you're saying there. You're saying that in the normal circumstances, somebody attacking your country, that would, you know, as you say, it would be a terrible thing. But are you saying that there are people within Iran who are glad this is happening because they think it could catalyze a change of regime?
Yes. I mean,
Wow.
yes. And it's strange to say that. And I think you also need to recognize, look, it's not like 100% of the people inside Iran are against the regime. There are people who are still with the regime because they benefit from the regime being there. But over the years, I've seen more and more people become anti-regime. 2022, the Women Life Freedom protests, that was a major turning point. I mean, there were people that were sources of mine who had worked for the Iranian government and then left and went into the private sector, and then their experiences in the private sector showed the vast corruption of the government, and that started to change them. I mean, I was surprised myself after I hosted my documentary on the Iran versus Israel shadow war. I was surprised to have people ask me, do you think Israel will come and take out the regime? And I would respond with, I do think that it is a possibility that they will attack. I think this conflict that's been going on for decades is coming out of the shadows, which I named the documentary as such. I interviewed the former Mossad chief, Tamir Pardo, who was the architect of these targeted assassinations. So I saw this coming. I did say that this was a likely scenario. However, I was surprised to find that people, in essence, wanted help.
Wow.
However, they also recognize that, and everybody is accepting this, that it's not going to be the Americans or the Israelis or any foreign power that's going to overthrow this regime. It has to be people inside Iran. It has to be the people themselves. They have to mobilize. There has to be opposition.
So what does that mean? Does that mean, I don't know, like other Arab countries, the Saudis, for example, or Qatar helping to sort of arm people for some kind of civil war? Is that what people are thinking?
I mean, you're looking at this from the perspective of what happened in Syria, right? I mean, the fact of the matter is we saw Assad fall in December, but it took almost 15 years for this to happen. And there was quite a lot of outside help for opposition forces. I mean, there was an opposition leadership, there is infrastructure. Iran doesn't have that. There's fragmented, there's talk of Pahlavi coming back, for example, the son of the Shah who fled at the start of the Iranian Revolution, the Islamic Revolution in 1979. And actually Reza Pahlavi, who has recently been in Israel, that's fueled rumors of whether or not Israel is creating a space to like help Pahlavi return, for example. But like, of course, this is all talk.
Yeah,
none of this is confirmed. We don't know.
Okay.
And as far as I've seen, there is no real plan for an opposition to come in and an opposition figure to come in and take over and topple the regime, for example.
And you're right, because the thing is, for that to work successfully, particularly against such a brutal authoritarian regime, you really need to have, it's got to be well-resourced. You need a very good leader. You need organisation. You need infrastructure, and that doesn't exist at the moment. And look, you have good contacts with the regime, and have you managed to speak to anybody close to Khamenei? What is the feeling amongst the Iranian leadership at the moment?
As you can imagine, these sources are quite elusive. And when they do speak to me, it's very much with the intention of getting their message out to the world. So the fact that one of my sources who is close to the supreme leader responded and very calmly said that, oh, this is just a misunderstanding, and this is just, he mentioned that he felt like the security situation was pre-World War II. It was like at that moment pre-World War II, but he also had some expletives to say about the Israelis and said that the Netanyahu's, quote, regime will collapse. And so he is confident now. That being said, they're going to exude an air of confidence because they don't want their people to think that that their regime is about to collapse. Now, that being said, this same source in 2022, summer of 2022, told me that he was very concerned that there was going to be a flare-up in the region and that things were going to escalate and there was going to be a miscalculation, particularly with Israel. Now, I believe actually that this was going to happen at that time. However, the women life freedom protests sparked by the death of Mahsa Amini ended up sidetracking that, and so delaying that rather. And so again, like, they have been prepared for this, but at the same time, I think they're also shocked and underestimating just how deep Mossad is inside Iran. I mean, to be able to take out military commanders in their homes at 3:30 in the morning, it's akin to the Pagers operation and against Hezbollah in Lebanon. So there is massive paranoia now inside Iran because very clearly there is deep security cracks within the regime, and they're infiltrated. Their intelligence agencies are infiltrated, and this has been planned for a very long time, months, if not years. Okay.
Well, look, Suzanne, what a fascinating conversation. Really, really interesting to speak to you and get your perspective. Please do come on and speak to us again. That was a really interesting conversation. Thanks for your time. That's Suzanne Kianpour, who is an Emmy-nominated American-Iranian journalist. And as you heard, they're a real expert on these long-standing tensions between Israel and Iran. But really interesting to hear from her that there will be some people within Iran who will be hopeful that maybe these attacks from Israel could spark to some kind of regime change. So it's interesting that Netanyahu has picked up on that and made that sort of comment, although, as she said, that will be a very difficult thing to do. There's not a lot of infrastructure in Iran, but that's a very interesting perspective there. Right.